Hello crafters, today we're gonna craft some columns. Let's go. Okay, there are many ways to make some columns, but I'm gonna use some pill tubes as a base. These used to contain some vitamins. Here you can see the scale of the tube in front of a miniature, so you have an idea of the size of the column we're gonna make. But they come in various sizes. By the way, they're also great to store some washers. But I'm gonna use some sand to weight them down. It's gonna be a lot cheaper. So I'm gonna fill the tube at least halfway up. The weight must definitely be at the bottom of the tube for it to be stable. So there are different techniques to make the stone work. As you can see here, I'm using some thin foam board and I'm cutting it in very small pieces. But it'll take a lot of time. So I'm gonna show you the fast technique to get columns. Just bear in mind, if you want this ragged, complex look, well, you have to stick them individually. It'll take time, but it should look great. What I'm gonna do is take this thin foam board. It's about 1 or 2 millimeters thick, max, and I'm gonna cut stripes on it. I'm not gonna measure, but I'm roughly gonna make them even. So what I'm gonna do is glue the straps of foam onto the tube. Now you're quickly going to see why I actually did straps instead of just gluing it on at once. So for the bottom row, I'm actually going to push the tube while gluing the strap on it, because I actually want this bottom strap to be flush with the ground. So for the first one, I'm gonna push it down. While the hot glue is still warm, I strongly suggest you actually push on the foam to make sure to have a very even curve. So don't hesitate to push with your thumbs on the foam. I usually glue them in 2 times, first half of the strap and then the rest. And then you just have to use an X-Acto knife and cut the separation and push it down so you have a clear separation. Okay, on to the next row. So now you understand why we made straps. The idea is actually to shift the next row a little bit to the right to make sure the separation you're obviously gonna have on the piece will not always be on the same place. You definitely don't want to end up with one type of separation all along the column from the top to the bottom. So the idea is actually to break the pattern and to shift the different straps to make sure the separation isn't always going to be on the same place. But apart from this, the movement is going to be exactly the same. You're gonna roll it and glue it all along, then cut it and press it down. And you're gonna make all the column like this. It's not very difficult to do and it's actually pretty fast. So for the top of the column, I actually added one last piece, as you can see. And this is going to leave a space at the top, and I'm actually going to fill it with some foam. So remove the whips of glue. You're gonna have quite a lot of them, but you can remove them very easily by rubbing the column. Now to top the column, I'm actually going to use a thicker scrap of foam. And I'm gonna use another tube as template to cut it pretty fast. The only thing left to do is to add some hot glue and stick it in. Now let's take a sharp X-Acto knife and we're gonna cut the separations between the stones. Because for now, the only thing we have as separations are the separations between the different straps. So you can do the pattern you want. It can be very regular with exactly the same size of stones. What I wanted to do is something fairly regular, but you've got some smaller and some larger ones. What you definitely want to do though is to make sure they're alternated. You can also use a nail file to trim any excess of foam sticking out. And now we're simply going to use an empty ballpoint pen to widen the crevices between the stones. It'll give more depth to the column. So first, we do it vertically, all the separations we've cut in, and then we're going to do the separations between the rows. Once it's done, it's time to texturize the piece. Now you can use a very classic technique using aluminum foil rolled in a ball and using to imprint the texture. It will work, but you will have to push pretty hard with the ball. So I'm gonna use the technique Jeremy from Black Magic Craft tested not too long ago. I'm gonna use this kind of hot wire that is used to cut foam that can be heated up, and I'm gonna roll some aluminum foil on it, making sure that the aluminum foil is pretty ragged and pretty, crisp. And I'm gonna heat it up. And this will allow me to print the texture a lot better into the foam, because it's actually going to melt the foam a little bit and it's gonna harden it at the same time. Now this kind of tool really isn't very expensive, but if you use it on foam and using some aluminum foil on it, I strongly recommend you using a respirator and doing it in a well ventilated place, because I'm not sure the fumes are gonna be very good for your health. Anyway, as you can see, the texture is really good. It's really going to give this stone effects. I also really like this type of foam, because it's actually grainy, so you have the grainy aspect of the foam imitating the grain of the stone, and you're gonna have this texture that is gonna be added on. The more you press on the foam, the more matter you're going to remove. It's going to melt down, and it's going to harden. So don't press too much, otherwise you'll have a big gap on your column. You can also use the tip of the tool to engrave the pattern. Don't forget to do the top of the column as well. Now we're going to paint it. So I'm going to do a wash with a very dark brown. I'm going for my usual color scheme to match the other terrain pieces I've made. So I'm going for limestone, a very soft, very light stone color. So I'm actually going to start with a base coat, dark base coat of brown. And I'm going to make sure to dilute it to make sure it goes in every recess. I want this paint to go between the stones. You can use a hair dryer if you want to dry it faster. Now I'm going to go for the mid-tones. As you can see, I'm going for a salmon kind of color, mixing in some burnt sienna, some yellow, and a lot of white. And I'm going to brush on it. I'm definitely going to spare the recesses between the stones, but I'm also going to try to keep some of that brown on the stones. It'll give this grainy aspect. And finally, I'm gonna end up with some ivory. What you can do is gradually add some whites to your mix, but you really can end up to make the texture pop with actual whites or ivory. It really depends on the color scheme you want, on the type of stone you want. I was really going for a very light stone. So here you have all my columns. I think they came out really great. Now we're gonna harden them with some Mod Podge. So as you've probably noticed, I didn't Mod Podge it at first. Last time I tried to Mod Podge and harden a craft before painting it, I ended up losing a lot of detail on the craft because of the carvings, and the carvings were actually flooded and filled in by the Mod Podge. So what I'm doing here is putting the Mod Podge coat at the end and diluting it with at least as much water as there is Mod Podge. This will harden the crafts regardless, and you can even put on several coats because they will dry very fast. But at least I'm sure I'm not going to lose any detail or any recess. So here you have a display of the results. Obviously columns can be used in various ways. They make for excellent covers or hiding spots. But provided you made them the same size, they'll actually be pretty stable as well. So if you have modular terrain, you could actually use them as building pieces for constructs. So I hope you guys liked the tutorial. If you did, just tell me in the comments, give me some feedback. Don't hesitate to like, subscribe, and I'll see you later for another episode. Landvaettr signing off.